The school bell rang, signaling the end of another chaotic day at Brighthaven High. Students poured out of the doors, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Among them, 17-year-old Alexia Rivers moved swiftly, her gaze scanning the crowded school grounds with a sharpness that went beyond her age. Today wasn't like every other day. There was a tension in the air, something she couldn't shake off. As Alexia stepped outside the gates, she spotted a police cruiser parked on the corner. Leaning against it, two officers, Sergeant Frank Daly and his sidekick, Officer Kyle Ward, eyed the dispersing students with a look that made Alexia's skin crawl. Frank, known for his aggressive behavior, let out a low laugh as his eyes locked onto Alexia. "Hey kid, got a minute?" Frank's voice carried over the noise, sharp and authoritative. The nearby students fell silent, their eyes darting between Alexia and the officers. Alexia's steps faltered, but she forced a smile, masking the anger brewing inside her. She'd been investigating Sergeant Frank's dealings for weeks now, undercover as a high school student. But today she was done playing it safe. "Yeah, what's up?" Alexia kept her tone light, but her senses were on high alert. Frank's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed more like a predator's than a public servant's. "How about tie my laces, huh? Can't have my boots flapping when I'm chasing down troublemakers." The request hung in the air, turning heads as students gathered, curious yet wary. Alexia felt her pulse quicken, heat rising in her cheeks. "Really, Frank? Isn't that beneath you?" She shot back, her voice steady but edged with defiance. Ward, ever the follower, snickered and leaned closer to Frank, whispering something that made the sergeant chuckle. "Think you're too good for a little respect, huh? Or maybe you're just too used to people letting you slide by," Frank replied, his tone mocking. Alexia's fists clenched at her sides. She had dealt with arrogance, but Frank's need to dominate and humiliate struck a nerve. She took a deep breath, ready to give them a piece of her mind, when a familiar face appeared across the street. Agent Malcolm Kane, her mentor. He gave a subtle nod, his presence a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. Without missing a beat, Alexia reached in her bag, pulling out her badge. The medal gleamed in the afternoon sun as she held it up for all to see. "Here's the thing, Frank. I'm not just another student. I'm with the FBI, and I've been documenting your little power trips for weeks." The gathered students gasped, phones snapping up to capture the moment. Frank's face paled, the arrogance slipping away as he glanced nervously at Ward. "You're bluffing." "No way you're FBI," he stammered, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Try me," Alexia shot back, her eyes flashing with the fire of all the injustice she'd witnessed. "And believe me, this video's going viral." Frank's bravado crumbled before Alexia's unwavering glare. His eyes darted to the growing crowd, then to the badge she held up with authority. The students around them watched with a mix of awe and disbelief, whispering among themselves. Alexia had been just another student, blending into the sea of faces. Until now. "Look, kid," Frank started, his voice slipping into a false calm, but Alexia wasn't having it. "You think you can bully people in broad daylight and get away with it?" Alexia interrupted, her tone cutting through his weak protest like a blade. "I've seen how you treat people around here. Not anymore." She could feel the energy of the crowd shift, a spark of defiance and hope igniting among the students who had been silenced for too long. It was a small town, and Frank had ruled his patch like a petty king, but now the tables were turning. Frank's hand twitched toward his belt, as if the weight of his baton and sidearm might still give him an edge. But then he saw Agent Malcolm Kane walking purposefully toward them, his suit immaculate, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses that reflected Frank's fearful expression right back at him. "Sergeant Daly, Officer Ward, I suggest you step back." Malcolm's voice was as smooth as it was authoritative. He didn't shout, but the weight of command in his words was undeniable. Ward immediately took a step back, his face paling as he recognized Malcolm. But Frank, not ready to be outdone, puffed out his chest. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Frank sneered, trying to reclaim the upper hand. "Special Agent Malcolm Kane, FBI. I'm here overseeing Alexia's investigation into allegations of misconduct and abuse of authority," he said coolly, producing his own badge. And based on what I just witnessed, it looks like we got a lot to talk about. Frank's mouth opened and closed, like a fish struggling for air. This is a misunderstanding, he blustered, trying to save face in front of the crowd. The girl's been acting suspicious for weeks. Oh, you mean doing her job? Malcolm cut in sharply. He turned to Alexia, giving her a subtle nod. Agent Rivers, go ahead. Alexia felt a surge of satisfaction as she met Malcolm's gaze. She took out her phone and tapped the screen, bringing up a recording. The speakers crackled. Then Frank's voice filled the air, harsh and mocking. You think you're untouchable, huh? A little nobody like you. Frank paled even more as his own voice echoed back at him, his bluster dissolving under the weight of the evidence. The crowd pressed closer, the whispers growing louder as students held up their phones, capturing every moment. The tables had turned completely, and Frank knew it. Enough of this. Turn off those cameras. Frank barked desperately, his voice cracking as he reached for Alexia's phone. But she was quicker, sidestepping him with ease. Malcolm's hand shot out, gripping Frank's arm with surprising strength, holding him in place. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sergeant, Malcolm warned, his voice low and deadly serious. You're already in enough trouble as it is. Just then, the crowd parted to make way for another unexpected arrival. Samara Brooks, a local activist and a known voice against police corruption. She was often the thorn in the side of officers like Frank, documenting their misdeeds and rallying the community to stand up for themselves. About time someone stood up to this bully, Samara declared, her voice ringing out confidently. And it looks like today's the day justice finally catches up to him. Frank turned on her, but his anger was met with the sight of dozens of phones recording his every move. You all think this is some kind of joke? He shouted, his voice cracking with panic. I'm an officer of the law, and I will not be disrespected. Malcolm's grip on Frank's arm tightened, and he leaned in, speaking just loudly enough for Frank to hear, though the venom in his words could have cut through steel. Respect is earned, not demanded. And I think your time is up. Frank's eyes darted from Malcolm to Alexia, then to the gathered students and Samara, all watching with defiant smiles. He tried to jerk his arm free, but Malcolm held firm, his expression unyielding. It was clear to everyone present that the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. But Frank wasn't done yet. Desperation can make men do foolish things, and Frank was nothing if not desperate. He took a sudden swing at Malcolm, hoping to regain control, but Malcolm ducked effortlessly, his movements precise and swift. Before Frank could react, Malcolm twisted his arm behind his back, pressing him against the hood of the police cruiser. Assaulting a federal agent? That's going to look great on your record, Frank, Malcolm remarked, his tone dry as he snapped handcuffs onto Frank's wrists. The crowd erupted in cheers, a triumphant sound that echoed off the school buildings. Ward, pale and trembling, raised his hands as if surrendering to the inevitable. I didn't have anything to do with this. I swear, he stammered. Alexia turned her gaze to Ward, narrowing her eyes. You stood by and watched him abuse his power. That makes you complicit. But maybe, just maybe, if you cooperate, there's a chance for you to redeem yourself. Ward nodded frantically, his eyes wide with fear as he glanced at Frank, now cuffed and fuming. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything, he promised, his voice barely a whisper over the excited murmur of the crowd. Samara stepped forward, addressing the students who had gathered. This is the kind of power we have when we stand together. Today, we made a difference, but there's a long way to go. Alexia scanned the crowd, seeing the hope in their faces. She knew that the journey wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a much larger battle. But for today, she'd taken a stand, and she wouldn't back down. She caught Malcolm's eye, and he gave her a rare, approving smile. Not bad, Agent Rivers. Not bad at all. Alexia allowed herself a small, satisfied grin. Thanks, but I'm just getting started. As the scene unfolded, a light drizzle began to fall, the raindrops mingling with the cheers of the students and the distant wail of police sirens approaching. Frank's scowl melted into a look of defeat as he was pushed into the back of the cruiser by a pair of arriving officers, now under arrest themselves. Alexia and Malcolm stood side by side, watching as the symbols of unchecked authority were driven away, while the crowd dispersed, buzzing with the thrill of witnessing a moment that would reshape their town. Samara turned to Alexia, her expression thoughtful. "You did good today, Alexia. But don't think this fight is over. There's still plenty more like him out there." Alexia nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I know. But today, we made a statement. And tomorrow, we'll keep pushing." Malcolm clapped her on the shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "We'll make sure of that. Now let's get back to headquarters. We got a lot of paperwork, and I'm sure you'll want to see how viral those videos are going." Alexia allowed herself a small chuckle as she pocketed her badge. "Yeah, I think a few people might have something to say about this." As they walked back through the thinning crowd, the rain washed away the last traces of tension, leaving only a sense of hope for the change to come. For Alexia, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where justice wasn't just an ideal, but a mission she was willing to fight for every single day. Alexia settled into the passenger seat of Malcolm's black SUV, her mind racing as they pulled away from the scene. The streets of Brighthaven, slick with rain, blurred past the window as she replayed the events of the afternoon. She could still hear the cheers, the chants, and the defiant voices of her classmates echoing in her ears. But underneath the victory was a lingering unease. Frank's desperation, his outburst, the way he had seemed willing to risk everything in that final moment. "Something on your mind?" Malcolm's voice cut through her thoughts, his tone calm but curious. Alexia glanced over at him. "It's just Frank." He didn't seem like the type to crack so easily. It felt like he knew something that made him think he could still get out of this. Malcolm raised an eyebrow, keeping his eyes on the road. "You're not wrong. People like Frank don't break unless they're under pressure. The question is, what kind of pressure?" Alexia stared out at the passing buildings, her thoughts turning darker. "You think he's got someone pulling his strings?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Could be. We've had reports of corruption going deeper in this town. Dirty cops, payoffs, evidence disappearing. It's one of the reasons we put you here in the first place." Alexia felt a chill run down her spine. She had known her mission went beyond just investigating local misconduct, but the idea of a larger conspiracy lurking behind Brighthaven's quiet facade was more unsettling than she'd imagined. "So Frank's just the tip of the iceberg." Malcolm shot her a sidelong glance, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I told you it wouldn't be easy, but you're doing great, kid. And now that the town knows you're on their side, they'll start coming to you with more. Just be careful. When you rattle cages, sometimes the big cats come out." Alexia smirked, the fire of determination flaring in her chest again. "Good. I'm ready for whatever they throw at me." They turned a corner, and the familiar silhouette of the abandoned warehouse came into view. This place, seemingly just another relic of the town's industrial past, had been repurposed by the FBI as a covert operations hub for the region. It was where Alexia had received her briefings, where she'd trained late into the night, and where she now hoped to uncover the truth behind Brighthaven's hidden corruption. As they stepped out into the rain-soaked parking lot, Malcolm's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression growing serious. "Looks like Frank's lawyer is already working overtime. He's claiming excessive force, wrongful detainment. They're trying to flip this on us." Alexia's eyes narrowed. "They can't be serious. We've got all the footage, the crowd, everything. Doesn't matter to them. They're hoping they can discredit you, make the town think you're just some kid playing detective," Malcolm replied, leading her through the heavy steel doors into the dimly lit interior of the warehouse. The room hummed with the quiet buzz of computers and surveillance equipment. Inside, agents moved with purpose, sifting through stacks of documents and reviewing footage from hidden cameras planted throughout the town. Alexia's eyes adjusted to the low light as she followed Malcolm to the far end, where a wall of monitors displayed everything from police radio chatter to live feeds from traffic cams. Agent Linda Shaw, one of the tech specialists, turned her chair to greet them. "You caused quite a stir today, Alexia," she said with a grin, gesturing toward a screen where a local news station had already picked up the footage of Frank's arrest. "The town's buzzing about what happened. Hashtag Justice for Brighthaven is trending." Alexia couldn't help but smile at that. "Good. The more people see this, the harder it'll be for them to bury it. Linda's expression turned more serious as she pulled up a map of Brighthaven on one of the monitors. Red dots marked various locations throughout the town, each one a potential lead. But there's more. While you were dealing with Frank, we intercepted a call from the station. Someone's cleaning up records. Files on certain incidents are disappearing from their servers. Malcolm's expression darkened. So they're trying to cover their tracks. Any idea who's behind it? Linda nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. We traced the activity to a lieutenant in the department, Gregory Hayes. He's been quietly pulling strings, hiding reports that implicate certain officers, Frank included. Alexia leaned closer, studying the map. Hayes? I've heard that name. People say he's untouchable, that he's got friends in high places. If he's involved, this could go all the way to the top. Malcolm crossed his arms, considering their next move. If Hayes is behind this, we'll need more than just public support. We need concrete evidence, something that ties him directly to these cover-ups. Alexia's mind raced as she pieced the puzzle together. What if we set a trap? Leak some false information through the department, see how Hayes reacts. If he tries to bury it, we'll catch him in the act. Malcolm's eyes glinted with approval. Not bad, Alexia. Not bad at all. But we'll need to be careful. Hayes is no Frank. He's smarter, more dangerous. If he gets wind of what we're doing, he won't hesitate to retaliate. Linda adjusted her headset, her gaze focused on the monitor. I can plant the bait. Make it look like there's a new witness willing to testify against Frank. If Hayes moves to silence it, we'll have our proof. Malcolm nodded. Do it. And Alexia, I want you to keep your head low for now. We can't afford to tip our hand too early. Alexia's fists clenched at her sides, but she nodded. I get it. But if Hayes makes a move, I want to be the one to take him down. Malcolm gave her a hard look, but there was a hint of pride in his eyes. You'll get your chance. Just remember, patience is a virtue, even for young agents. With that, they set the plan into motion. Linda worked quickly, creating a dummy witness profile and uploading it to the department's network. They watched the monitors as the bait was laid, waiting to see if Hayes would take the bite. Hours passed, the tension thickening as the clock ticked closer to midnight. Suddenly, a ping sounded from Linda's console. Got him, she whispered, her voice tight with excitement. Hayes just accessed the file, and he's sending a squad car to interview the witness. Malcolm straightened, his expression sharpening. Good. Now, let's see where this trail leads. Alexia's heart pounded as they tracked the movements of the squad car through the city, following the flashing red dot on the map. It stopped in a quiet residential neighborhood, far from the witness's supposed location. The officers who stepped out looked more like enforcers than investigators, their intentions clear. It's a cleanup crew, Malcolm muttered. They're not here to ask questions. Alexia felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to stay calm. If Hayes is this reckless, he's not planning to leave any loose ends. We need to move fast. Malcolm nodded, his expression grim. We'll follow them, catch them red-handed. And when we do, Hayes will have nowhere to hide. They hurried back to the SUV, Linda feeding them live updates through their earpieces. As they sped through the rain-soaked streets, Alexia's thoughts turned to what lay ahead. This was no longer just about exposing Frank or earning the town's trust. It was about confronting a system that had allowed corruption to flourish, and she was willing to risk everything to tear it down. Malcolm's grip tightened on the steering wheel as the squad car came into view, its occupants unaware of the shadows following close behind. This is it, Alexia, he said, his voice steady but charged with energy. No room for mistakes. Alexia nodded, her adrenaline surging as they closed in. Let's bring them down. As the SUV tailed the squad car through Brighthaven's winding streets, the rain hammered down, turning the night into a blur of slick asphalt and shimmering lights. Alexia kept her focus sharp, her hand resting on the door handle, ready to jump into action the moment they reached their target. The squad car came to a stop in front of an abandoned factory on the edge of town, an isolated spot perfect for a secretive operation. The two officers climbed out, their faces hardened, their intentions clear as they moved toward the building's shadowy entrance. Alexia's pulse quickened. She and Malcolm parked a safe distance away, slipping out into the downpour. "This is our chance," Malcolm whispered, gesturing for her to follow closely. "We catch them here," and Hayes goes down with them. They crept along the side of the factory, their footsteps muffled by the rain. Inside, the officers began to search the building, unaware that their every move was being recorded by Linda's surveillance drone hovering discreetly overhead. Alexia and Malcolm pressed against the side door, listening as the officers talked. Hayes said to clean up everything. One officer muttered, his voice low and tense. "Can't leave any trace of this." "And what about the girl?" "That Rivers kid?" the other replied. "Hayes wants her gone too. She's making too much noise." Alexia's stomach twisted at the realization that she was now a direct target. Malcolm met her gaze, his expression serious but encouraging. "You're in this now, Alexia. No backing out." Alexia nodded, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She took a deep breath and then kicked the door open. It crashed against the wall, startling the officers inside. Before they could react, she and Malcolm had their guns drawn. "Freeze! FBI!" Malcolm's voice boomed through the cavernous space, echoing off the factory walls. The officers spun around, their hands instinctively moving toward their weapons, but Alexia stepped forward, her gun trained steadily on them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Drop them now." For a tense second, the officers hesitated, then dropped their guns to the ground with a clatter, raising their hands. Malcolm moved quickly, securing their hands behind their backs with zip ties. "Nice work, Agent Rivers," he said with a satisfied nod. "Now let's get these two to talk." One of the officers, sweat streaming down his face despite the cold rain, looked up at Alexia with a sneer. "You think you've won? Hayes' friends, big ones. He'll come for you next." Alexia crouched down, locking eyes with him. "Maybe, but tonight, you're the one going in and we've got all the proof we need." Malcolm snapped photos of the scene, while Linda's voice crackled through the earpiece. "I've got everything on video, sending it to the local news and the FBI headquarters as we speak. Hayes won't be able to bury this one." As the two officers were led back to the SUV, Alexia felt a wave of exhaustion hit her, but she pushed it back. They still had one last stop to make, the precinct, where Hayes was likely trying to clean up his tracks before the full story broke. With the captured officers in the back seat, Malcolm and Alexia sped through the night toward the heart of Brighthaven. By the time they arrived at the station, red and blue lights already flashed across the parking lot. Local police, called in by Linda, had surrounded the building, their guns drawn. Inside, Hayes stood behind his desk, his face flushed with anger as officers moved around him, shutting down computers and pulling files. His eyes widened when he saw Alexia and Malcolm enter, flanked by uniformed officers. "You're making a huge mistake," Hayes spat, his voice shaking with barely concealed rage. "I have connections, people who won't let this stand." Alexia held up her phone, showing the footage of the intercepted call and the failed cover-up operation. "You're done, Hayes. Every lie, every cover-up, it's all coming out." Hayes' composure cracked as he lunged forward, trying to grab the phone from Alexia's hand. But Malcolm was faster, stepping in to block him. Hayes stumbled, and two officers grabbed him, forcing him into handcuffs. His rage turned to desperation, his voice rising as he shouted at the room. "This town needs me. You'll be begging for me to come back when you realize what I've been protecting you from." But no one was listening. The officers who had once turned a blind eye to Hayes' actions now watched in silence, many of them relieved to see him finally face justice. The station buzzed with activity as Linda's files continued to stream in, each one exposing another layer of corruption. Alexia took a step closer to Hayes, meeting his eyes with a cold, unyielding stare. "Brighthaven doesn't need you. It needs people who care about justice, not power. And that's exactly what you're going to face now." As Hayes was led out of the precinct, the gathered officers broke into quiet applause, a few even offering Alexia and Malcolm grateful nods. The tide was turning, and for the first time in years, Brighthaven felt like a town that could breathe again. Outside, the rain began to let up, revealing a sky streaked with the first hints of dawn. Malcolm clapped Alexia on the shoulder, his expression softening. "Not bad, Rivers. You brought down a whole operation in a single night." Alexia offered a tired but triumphant smile. Yeah, but we couldn't have done it without everyone. This town needed to see that standing up to bullies works. Malcolm nodded, glancing back at the precinct as the sun began to rise over Brighthaven. Think you'll stick around? See this through? Alexia took a deep breath, looking out over the town that had become both her mission and her home. Yeah, I think I will. There's still a lot of work to do, and I want to be part of it. Malcolm's smile grew. Good. Because something tells me this town's going to need you. Together, they watched as the dawn broke, casting light over a town ready to change. For the first time in a long time, Alexia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, at the heart of the fight for justice.